So that's the first point. That's done. Again, these are not massively. These aren't particularly watched streams.
Right.
It's just so we get content after. Really, that's the main point.
Makes sense to me.
Zoom out a bit so you don't see my face the closest. Don't want that, do I? Just wait for background noises to stop, and I'll be there. Why does someone always want a glass of water and some garlic bread when you? Oh yeah, I'm live on Twitch. Hello, yeah, forgot.
And we're live.
Oh, you want to see the actual game? Oh, come on, Xbox controller, pick up. Okay, get your website open on this PC. So much. What? See, this is the thing. I say this every week, but I thought, do you know what I'll do? I'll just play some indie games. I'll just talk to the devs. That'd be easy. Oh my god. It's not easy. It's always something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So you are Sean. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. I've got everything open. Good. So I'm ready to start if you're ready. I know you've been ready for ages.
Yep. I'm ready.
Good. Okay, so welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Thank you.
Can I say your surname, or will people track you down on?
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine.
Okay. Well, in fact, for the first time ever, I'm not going to ruin it by saying your name and then saying the game that you have. Just for my first question to be, what's your name and what game have you got?
Right.
So, hi, mystery guest. Let's jump straight in and tell us who you are and what your game is called.
Well, I am Sean from the States, the US of A, and my game is called Eternal Edge Plus. Emphasis on the plus.
Oh.
There's an Eternal Edge, which is something I'm burying right now. And so we have Eternal Edge Plus. It's a spiritual success. What's that?
Is Eternal Edge your like internet browser history?
Yeah, pretty much. Eternal Edge is one of my early releases, one of my first official releases that I published. Came out on the Nintendo Switch, I think about 2 years ago now. But I had, it was a big learning experience for me, which is great. I learned a lot. But the game came out, and I had a whole lot of issues, development issues, publishing issues, patching issues. Turns out I couldn't patch the game, So basically, it came out, had a lot of bugs, and there was nothing I could do about it.
Okay. So
long story short.
Why did you call this one the same name, Plus?
So this was originally actually just going to be a quote-unquote Ultimate Edition. It was going to be just a re-release of the game, but on Steam.
Okay.
So my plan was to not recreate, but just update the original game, release it on Steam, and then hopefully re-release it on the Switch with a fixed version.
Okay, so then the name made sense then, yeah. Okay.
Yes, exactly, and it kind of developed and evolved over the course of the development, and it eventually turned into a reskin because I was getting more interested in like doing bigger and better things. The first game was kind of voxel style. As you know, this game, Eternal Edge Plus, is definitely not voxel style, so it's very different.
Yeah, can you explain that style?
Yeah, voxel styles. It's kind of like I don't know if you've heard of like Cube World or like 3D Dot Game Heroes. Yeah. The original release was heavily influenced by 3D Dot Game Heroes on the PlayStation 3, which is kind of like a recreation, if you will, of the original Zelda game with like cubes for pixels. It's a really fun game. I really enjoyed that game. So when I was making the original, it was actually a top-down more of an arcade RPG style game. It's
Right.
very Yeah, so that's kind of what I was going with. But then, as I was learning more and getting more comfortable with development, just in general, and people I had working with me, we were all getting more comfortable with like building a 3D world, from scratch, kind of.
Yeah, of course.
We wanted to explore that side of development more, and just kind of get out of our comfort zone. So the game eventually it just became a reskin of the original Eternal Edge, right? So we had like pure 3D models and pure 3D environments, no cube environments. For us, making cube, I'll say assets was easier than trying to make something that looked realistic or artsy or whatever, because we didn't have all that much experience. Turns out it became a big crutch, actually. we were kind of blocking ourselves from learning. So anyway, yeah, long story short, we got into this. It became a reskin, and then it became, well, let's add a little bit more story. Let's change up the story. Everything's just been redone completely. It's basically it's a whole new game, so it really is just a spiritual successor to the original.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it sounds like you've been developing it for quite a while, if you're talking about PS3 influences there.
Oh yeah. Well, so it goes back a while. My first game I ever released really publicly was called 8-Bit Hero, and that was on the Wii U. That was about 4 years ago. And then the sequel, or it was meant to be the sequel, I started working on a while later, maybe a few months later, and that is what turned into Eternal Edge. But it was, it was a top-down multiplayer arcade game. It's very, very, very different. Very, very different. And it kind of changed over the course of time. But yeah, so the original Eternal Edge I was building for, probably a year and a half. Just from different iterations, though. It would get built and then rebuilt, and then rebuilt, and then rebuilt, and things would change and come up with new ideas, and really it was just a terrible development cycle. Right. This game in general, I started the Ultimate Edition, which again was just re-releasing the game with some bug fixes on Steam. I started that iteration, I'll say, in February of last year. And I worked on it for about 2 months, and I finished it. Once I finished it, I was playing through the game with my buddy Morgan, who also works with me. And I was just playing the game, and I got about halfway through, and I was like, man, this thing just needs to be gutted.
No.
And I just, after the original release, I had a bad taste in my mouth. And a lot of the people who played the original release was like, yeah, the game's not bad, but it's got so many issues, blah, blah, blah. So, once I got halfway through the game, play testing, I was like, it's just so boring. It's just got so many issues and blah, blah, blah. So that turned into a reskin. So we pretty much, restarted. I wanted to add more story, et cetera, et cetera. That was a whole nother development cycle. So we had the original game, which was Eternal Edge. 3 months later, we rebuilt kind of Eternal Edge with the same content, just reskin.
Okay.
So that was a few months of that, a few months of this, a few months of that. Went back and forth. It was like, well, let's not focus on story. Oh, but let's focus on story. So again. When you're only listening to yourself and other people who are also like-mindedly, yeah, let's go big, and then 2 days later you're like, oh no, you're almost bipolar with what you want to do,
It's
right?
a common theme I'm hearing.
Exactly. So just recently, I feel like I've been able to whip that side out of me. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, let's just we've got what we've got. We're doing it. We're gonna finish it. It's gonna be great. Whatever. So yeah, it's gone through a lot of different iterations. I would say this version of the game that we're actually working on right now, and it's almost done. I'm actually doing some tidying up before I do like a full game test. This version is probably got started in, I think it was like September of last year.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. So, and this is like totally rebuilt from the ground up, right? There are some lingering systems here and there that like I've actually just recently gutted a bunch of and nuked a whole lot of other things. But it's totally rebuilt. Code base is all new. Everything is all new. It's definitely just a reimagining of the original game. It's got new story, new characters, new blah blah blah.
So was this because now this is built in Unity, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so was the original built in Unity as well? If you just used the
Yes.
same,
Yeah. It was
okay,
built in Unity.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that was a lot of the issue, right? I had my same game core, which already was flawed. I was trying to build on top of this flawed game core, ran into a bunch of issues. Yeah.
So start again.
Exactly.
I mean, okay. Well, first of all, again, if you're watching the live stream on Twitch during the podcast, then well done to you. But if you're not, then it looks incredible.
Thank you.
Again, I say this most weeks, but this looks just fantastic. I mean, like I said, it really is like you don't want to say. It reminds me of Breath of the Wild.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't like to sort of compare games too much, but if no one's got a clue of what I'm talking about because they're not seeing it,
right?
It's got that sort of style, hasn't it? It's
it's heavenly influenced.
Yeah, it's so smooth. The lighting's fantastic. It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm just if you're watching this, I'm just running around at the minute. Just doing nothing, so don't pay attention to what I'm actually doing. But I just wanted to get to the point where you're outside, where you really start to see
right, exactly
the real world.
I tried to build up that first kind of world map reveal shot.
Yes,
absolutely. The world is definitely something that I worked hard on, art wise. Again, it's heavily influenced by Breath of the Wild, the world itself, and the graphics the characters are very influenced by Wind Waker, which is my favorite Zelda game, definitely. Gameplay wise, it's definitely not Breath of the Wild. Okay. If it were, I'd probably be a bajillionaire, if I made that,
You never know. Really. It doesn't have to be.
That's right. It's more RPG. It's definitely an action RPG, and it's more linear than a game like Breath of the Wild is, where you literally just go wherever. Now, that being said, the game is open world. You can go wherever you want, whenever you want, and there are certain benefits to doing so. But you are suggested anyway to go certain directions because the enemy levels, the gear levels, etc., will be better matched for you.
Right. Okay. So So you said it was your friends helping you. How many people are working on this?
That's a confusing question.
Okay, next question.
So it's me. I am definitely the developer. I do a lot of stuff. I do art, programming. I do even some music. We outsource a lot of it now, but just a little bit of everything. One of my friends, Morgan, who works with me, he does a lot of like content integration, design. He's even QA now at this point. And then I have two of my brothers who in the past have worked with me on this. So one of my brothers, Kevin, who really worked hard with me on the first iterations of this game before it was this game, right? So the Eternal Edge update versions, he worked with me on those. He was the one who completely kind of rebuilt the map for the first time and redid a lot of the areas. I've since gone through and redone them. But so I've had a lot of help in those senses, and it was almost like if you would think of like a prototype version of the world, yes. Right? So I would say Kevin built our what would be cool version of the map, and at that point it was there, everything was there, but it wasn't really interactive, right? So I kind of recreated that with a lot of differences, but with the same feeling and the same sort of general areas in a more interactive way. And then there's my brother Scott, who randomly pops in. He'll do things for me when he can, because everyone, of course, has full-time jobs. They've got family, etc. So it's hard for people to jump in. But he'll do, character models. He'll do story. He'll do, anything he can really get his hand on. But for the most part, at this point, it's definitely been just me and Morgan working on it.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, that is a long answer to how many people are working on it.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So you outsource the audio as well now?
Yeah. So originally, I did all the music. The original game, it was all my compositions, I guess you could say. But it's just there's so much time invested in doing everything else. At some point I just had to go. I guess it's fine. Let's just get it from somewhere else. We're using a company called Epidemic right now for a lot of our main world map music, which is kind of like the more big epic themes when you're running around.
Okay.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we've also gotten tracks from a few other musicians who have been kindly enough to let us use them. But if you listen to like the title screen music, that's something I wrote. Loading screen music, that's something I wrote. A few others lingering around in the game. If you ever find a moonbucks,
a what? A moonbox?
If you shop in the game, moonbucks. So it's a a bit of a laugh at Starbucks. So there's moonbucks in the game, and they're everywhere. They're literally everywhere. You'll even find them in some of the dungeons. So if you enter Moonbucks, you'll get like this kind of jazzy theme going on in the background. Again, that's something I've done. But since the original release, I've just been trying to kind of get a lot of the work off of me and just focus on things that I need to focus on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I'm just about to again. If you're watching the live stream, I'm just about to enter the world.
Nice.
Here we go. Sorry, audio people. I did warn you. But I will be doing a live stream of this. For anyone who wants to hear more or see more about this game, I'll be doing a live stream. We'll arrange a time and date, and we'll get to it. So there we go. Wow, look at that. It does have the epic feel when you step out. Love it. Very Skyrim. Just okay, so who is working on the story? Now I know story is a big thing for you on this.
Yeah, it's a hard thing for us right now. Story was me and my brother and Morgan as well. There's not as much of the story in the game at the moment as I would like there to be.
Okay.
And there's a lot of things you'll come across as the player. You're running around, you'll see like a structure, or you'll see, like there's a big floating tree, or, there's a big something. Everything that's there actually does have a backstory, but not necessarily explained or present in the game. Okay. Even the main bad guy himself, he's got actually a lot of backstory. The main character, you get a tease of who the main character is, he and his wife, just in the intro write-up, right? So Cross and his wife, Evelyn, they're kind of like the protagonists. And, so they're like, they're these Eternals, that's the name. Eternal Edge, right? Okay. And they are what are called Eternals, which actually there's a big court of Eternals somewhere that go out and are kind of a commanding influence, and they go and try and like bring peace to the world. They're almost I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but they'll go and talk to rulers, talk to leaders, etc. They'll console them. They'll give them advice. I can't remember the word off the top of my head, but they do a lot of that kind of stuff. But they also are blessed with like strength and different things. So they will do, they'll fight battles they have to fight, etc. So there's a lot of that kind of backstory, which the player might not see. Now, again, what I'm doing right now is I'm doing kind of a cleanup pass. And so I'm hoping to, while I'm doing the cleanup pass, get the story kind of in there. I'm considering just using books or different points that the player could discover and discover more of the story in the game.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's been hard because again there really are mostly only ever two of us working on this.
Wow. Yeah.
So at some point you have to, yeah, keep going.
So what is the so? Could you give us an overarching idea of the storyline?
Yeah, of course. Sorry. So basically, the story is there's Cross, who's the main character, who is Eternal, and his wife Evelyn, um, and they are, as I was just saying, just these very strong, blessed people who are blessed with eternal life, basically, in the world. And they go around and they do deeds for people and missions that are given to them. So one of these missions that they were given is one that Evelyn, which is Cross's wife, was faced alone. She had to go do it alone, and it was to combat the Skeleton King, who's also known as the Dead King sometimes in the game. The Skeleton King is not like this end-all, be-all evil who's ruling the world or anything like that. He's really just ruling this one little area, which is the kingdom of Baor. But nonetheless, he is very strong. So Evelyn goes and tries to fight him, take back the lands for the people, but she can't beat him alone. She needs Cross with her. There's a whole lot of backstory with Cross not being there. Eventually, he does come to find her and sleep. So since Evelyn is eternal, she can't die. The Skeleton King was forced with just putting her to sleep. That's all he could do. So he put a curse on her and put her to sleep. And of course, as any good gaming storyline goes, the curse is split into 4 pieces and hidden throughout the kingdom. Yes, God, so thus we get to that part. So yeah, you as Cross come into the world, you find out about this curse, and the only way to lift it is to destroy the 4 cursed orbs and wake your wife, right? So that's kind of like Act 1. There are actually kind of 2 acts to the game. Act 1 is waking your wife, and then Act 2 is figuring out how to defeat the Skeleton King together. So there's actually a point in the game where after you've beat the main dungeons, you've woken your wife, she'll actually join you on your quest. And you'll have to do some missions, different things, in order to regain your strength together and then go fight the Skeleton King in his castle.
Does she just come along with you, or is it a character that you have to switch to play?
No, she just starts following you around.
Okay.
There is more stuff I wanted to do with this again, but it's just stuff that didn't make it in.
Of course.
Eventually, we kind of thought of like, well, what if you could choose to be her in the beginning instead of Cross, or what if it was multiplayer and then you could switch to Evelyn, or different things, but in the end of the day, we had to just be like, well, let's just focus on the one thing we're doing, and then if that gets in there, it gets in there.
Of course, once 100 million people buy the game, you'll add it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, DLC.
That's fair enough. Cool. Okay, so going back to yourself then, what got you into game development specifically? Is it just your love of games, or was there a...
Kind of. I come from a... Yeah, exactly. I come from a big family. When I was very young, and I had a lot of older siblings, they were very into games at the time. So pretty much as a baby, they were like playing Zelda, playing Mega Man, and they were kind of introducing me to all this stuff. So I was very into games growing up because of that. Started getting into like drag and drop programming probably when I was like 8 or 9. Just because they were like, oh yeah, Sean, it would be great if you could do this stuff. And I was like, yeah, so they would download things like, Game Maker, which is like drag and drop programming. So I learned a lot of, I guess you could say, programming logic from that, not necessarily how to write code, but just the logic of how the systems work. So I kind of started doing that. When I was in high school, I got into like apps, making apps. I made a lot of like app games on iOS. They were all terrible. But again, it was all part of the learning process. Eventually, and then I went to college. I actually did end up going to university for game development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then so I've just been kind of working on stuff ever since. My first release, which came out on the Wii U, I brought out a month after I graduated because I was working on it while I was in school. That was called 8-Bit Hero. Again, that one we're trying to bury, so we might do a resurrection of that at some point.
So there'll be no link in the show notes for that.
Right, exactly.
Oh, so you have been very busy then.
Yes. Yeah, busy bee.
Wow. Now, I had a question then. but I might have been attacking an enemy and I wasn't paying attention to what I was going to say. I tell you what, that's what it was. It was a side note of, I love the Wii U.
Oh yeah,
It was great.
yeah. One of the few, right? I like the Wii U. I think it's kind of nice.
It
It's
was
pretty
very
cool.
Yeah, that's completely off topic, but I was just came to my brain, and you've got it. So now I've noticed you've got these like little public quests.
What's that?
You've got like a little public quest that happens.
Yes.
quite
Oh,
unique.
like an event?
Yeah, a little event. Yeah, sorry, that's probably some sort of MMO fallback.
Yeah. So those are actually those are world events. So there are a few different ways for the player to level up. I mean, obviously they all involve some form of combat. I won't say you can go farming and gain XP or side random things or open up your phone and open up the Eternal Edge app and gain XP to level up. Nothing like that. But there are a few different branches the player can use to gain XP on the quest instead of just following the quest line.
Okay.
So there's world events, and then there are a bunch of side quests and a few other things that you can do to gain your XP, basically, for leveling up. Again, it is an RPG, right? But I tried to make it so that it wasn't so grindy like an RPG would be.
Well, I like the fact that you can choose to go over there and activate the event.
Right.
Can't you? You don't have to.
Correct. Yeah, it's totally optional.
I'm going to go and do it now and die, but you don't have to die.
Nice. Yeah, so those are totally optional, and they are dependent on the zone. So you can definitely run into an event in a different zone and be completely underleveled, and then that'll be the end for you, probably. I have seen a few patient players, and this is why it's been great to have the beta out there. But I have seen a few very patient players go into a zone they're not supposed to get into, go into an event, and just very patiently defeat the event and get the loot afterwards, which I'm okay with. I kind of expected people to do this, but I wanted to know what it would do to the game. Yes. So Morgan and I have been working on, okay, what do we do? I don't want to punish somebody for doing it, and that's the thing, right? Yeah. It's one of the things like Zelda does well, where you can go anywhere you want, you get the loot, and that's kind of it. You've got the loot, right? But because this is a RPG and you go from basically level 1 to level 100, there's a very big stat gap. What happens when you go over there and you pick up a sword that's really strong? That's kind of the part where things that I don't like in gaming kind of come in. And so we're kind of just deciding what we want to do with that. Things that I don't like in World of Warcraft, where you beat a level 50 boss at 15 accidentally because you had people carrying you, and you get a drop of a weapon that's level 50 and you can't use it. Yeah. And then you get to level 50 and you realize, it's not that great. Actually, I have this thing that's better. I really don't want that to happen. So I don't want to have, level caps or minimum level requirements on those. But at the same time, I don't want the player to use, this weapon that's got 1,000 strength versus 1. Yeah, that's so it's kind of this, It's an interesting problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm dead already.
Nice. Perfect. That's what I want to see.
So they were mean. And they're still attacking my body on the floor. What's a mean program?
Yeah, they're gonna make sure you're dead.
Yeah, they're doing a good job there.
But you're eternal, so you just come back.
Yes. Yes, we're eternal. Okay, so with the development, I always like to find now. I've got a feeling you're going to have a list here.
Oh, yeah.
Is there something in the game that's troubled you or surprised you while you've been developing? Something that you never thought was going to happen?
Yeah, it's not too complicated of a question. Luckily for you, I won't go off on a tangent. I probably will anyway.
Yeah, you will.
But
right.
I think the main thing has just been accepting when to just throw something out.
Yeah.
Learning, I guess you could say, when to throw something out, right? Like, I had built all these crazy big systems for the last game, and they worked really well. When I was porting to the Switch for the original Eternal Edge release, we ran into a lot of issues, and they weren't anything tied to the game or to the Switch itself. I don't think I'm allowed to go into detail about it, but there were back-end issues. Basically, just caused break randomly.
Okay.
And the game is an open world game, and there's a lot of loading happening all the time, pretty much 24/7 as you're running around. The game is loading the world in. So that was a huge issue, right? You would just experience random lockups here and there, and not be able to do anything about it. So a lot of the reason the original release had such long loading screens, which was one of the big problems about the game, is because I had written this whole back-end system to subvert the whole loading system in Unity. Oh. And so it would basically unload everything in the software, delete everything, recreate everything, and then load the player back in whenever it had to do it. And that was the only way I could get the game not to lock up.
Oh, man.
So that system has been, without me knowing, actually causing a lot of serious issues in the back end that I've only kind of just noticed, I would say, probably within the last 2 months. Because I was keeping it in there because I was like, in the back of my head, I was like, oh man, what if this issue comes back up when I try to do the Switch launch? And I've been testing it here and there on the Switch, and it's been working, but I just wasn't sure, right? So I was like, let me just keep it there just in case. So it turns out that was causing just a ton of issues. So it's really just for me in development learning, okay, we probably would have finished this thing a long time ago if we had just started from scratch. Just learn to accept when to just throw everything out.
And I suppose while you're developing the game, because it does take a while to develop a game, believe it or not.
Yes,
you learn new skills. And
that's right.
And new things, and you just
that's
learn to that's going to go in the next game. Not this
game.
Exactly.
Stick
to the plan.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
It can be something stupid like learning a new messaging thing, a new little variable over here that actually just makes everything run really fast. But you learn so much almost every day when you're doing this stuff, and it's things about the engine you're working in that you didn't even know about before. So it's an interesting process.
Tempting just to keep changing it, but it's like anything. It's like any project,
Right.
If you don't have a set plan to start with, you're always liable to veer off, just like this podcast.
That's exactly right.
Which is why I had to set some basic questions, because you end up just talking about trees and grass and animation. What are we doing? I forgot I'm actually recording this. Okay, cool. So I'd really like your targeting system that you can lock on. It's really nicely done. That feels really smooth. Because at first I was like, oh man, I've got to keep swinging the camera around, and then it teaches you to lock on. Oh, nice. That works very well.
Good, I'm glad you're using it.
Yes, I am. I nearly died again, but that's not the point. It's because I'm not concentrating, all right? So, after this game...
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, before I get to that, how many hours do you think are roughly in the game once it's finished? Are you predicting...
For like the average gamer?
For the average gamer. I know that's very hard to say, especially with an RPG.
That's a difficult question, but I think I can safely say... let me think about this in my head now before I say it. I think I can safely say about 20 to 25 hours.
Oh, okay, so that's a decent amount.
Yeah, it's going to be more than that. Just based off of the few people that I've seen play the new version, they've spent... I don't know, 3 hours in like an area that I spend maybe 5 minutes in when I'm playtesting.
Yeah. Cool.
So, it's going to be probably longer than that. I think for a fast gamer, it'll be about 12 hours just because there are those people who just kind of blaze through stuff and don't think twice and just go
skip,
point A to point B. Yeah, exactly. So there are those. But yeah, I think probably safe to say close to 20 hours of regular gameplay.
Okay.
I might be wrong on that.
Of course.
But I think that's accurate.
Just a nice idea. It's just a nice idea to see how long. Because like I said, for me, I'm terrible for skipping text.
Right, exactly.
But I mean, how have you dealt with that? The fact that you don't know how the people are going to react, how the player is going to react to the text and the story. He may just be skipping. I say he.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's kind of
or she. They.
Yes. No, I get it. I got you. I get you.
They may well be just skipping text, but they still need to know.
That's been something to get used to. Again, because the game, especially when the average person sees like pictures of the game or whatever, they're expecting an open world go experience.
Mhm.
I don't think people are expecting a heavy story experience, so that's why I haven't really focused on that. The bit that I put in just in the intro, right? There's actually a lot of text in the intro. You're lucky the whole game could be that way, but it's not. It's not just for you.
Thank you.
But I think, like, I've seen just a lot of people just they start reading, they're reading, they get through, a good few sentences of like what is story, and then they just start skipping. So it's been interesting to see like what a person's patience level is, like
Yeah.
what the average gamer's patience level is, because again, this isn't Persona, this isn't Fire Emblem. You're not expecting to hop in there and just start reading text, because there are games that you do, and that is kind of like a main point of the game, is the story and what the conversation is, almost like an anime experience.
Yes.
Right? You're kind of sitting there and you're just interested in this interaction between the characters. I will say that I haven't gotten to do enough world building, and because of that, I have not been relying on story, because I feel were to put story in, it would be more of a nuisance for the player, right? So that's why I've kind of littered, essences of the story around, versus just like forcing the player into it. Because again, it hasn't been a feature that I've been able to focus on.
Yeah, because this is always going to be the problem with this style of game. It is kind of a crossover game, isn't it? You
Yeah.
kind of, like I said, you've got the people that just want to run around the open world, slide
Right.
on stuff, hit stuff,
Right.
jump in things, but you're going to have people that want to read a story as well. So you kind
Exactly.
you really are kind of stuck in the middle of doing a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's difficult. So what
Yeah.
about bosses in the game? Is there a set amount of bosses in the game, or is it more
Yeah.
dungeons
There
with a
are
boss at the
there are
end?
quite a few, I would say, like mini bosses that are more world bosses, maybe. That are just around the world for you. If you defeat those guys, you'll get good gear, good crafting materials, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Each main dungeon, which, let me think about the number here, because it's changed in the past.
Well, once you've said it now, this is the last
That's
time.
exactly right. No, but all the dungeons are there, so I think we're good. So there are 5 main dungeons, and then there are 2 sub main dungeons. But each of those 7 dungeons has a boss. I would call like a main boss at the end of it.
Okay.
So there are 7 main boss fights. Of course, there are other things that you'll run into. Again, like I was saying, world bosses, mini bosses. You'll fight like a kind of like a epic enemy, or like a elite enemy, which I kind of consider to be like a mini boss during quest lines. Certain quest lines.
Yep.
And then there are hidden dungeons in the world. There's 20 hidden dungeons, which
really?
are called they're called Vaults of the Skeleton King.
Ooh.
And they're kind of where the Skeleton King keeps his treasure hoards, almost. So that's kind of the idea behind that. But yeah,
his secret biscuit stash.
exactly. Yeah, he keeps all of his good stuff in there. So those are actually kind of like throwback dungeons. And they were in the original game as well, but these are all new, all 20 new dungeons. Maybe not 20, maybe 18 new dungeons. I don't know. We might have kept one. But yeah, you actually, when you enter one of these, you'll go into a complete top-down view, like an old school NES Zelda style kind of top-down view, and you'll play through the dungeon like that.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, those are fun. I've always kind of enjoyed those. I don't play test all that much, and then when I'm going through the world and then I come across one, I'm like, oh yeah, we put one of these here, and I'll go inside and I'll be like, oh, that was interesting. I've never played that one.
Wow, so I'm amazing.
It's kind of yeah.
Okay, and what about the character? So, for character-wise, is there a skill tree or a level progression, or how does it? I know we touched on it.
Yeah, so in the original game, there was a class system. I've steered clear of it this time around for various reasons. Because I wanted to just focus on the character and his abilities and basically his class. What is the character's class? To make it, I could say, more polished, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
In the original game, there were 4 main classes, each with a subclass that you had to get to first. So there was like the mage and the warrior and stuff like that.
Right.
Again, because of time and only being a single developer, there's no more a class system in the game, but there's kind of like a heavy tool system. You can kind of decide as the player if you're going to be a heavy tool user or just a melee user.
Okay.
And you'll get various abilities throughout the game. There are a few that you unlock later on that you don't get in the demo. But other than that, you're going to be focusing on the tools that you find and you craft. So if you find the revolver, which is in the demo, and nobody's ever picked up, which I'm very confused about because it's in the most obvious location. But there is you can combo that with your weapon. So like I rely heavily on the revolver because I don't like to get up close to some of the bigger monsters. So I'll get in there, I'll get a few hits off while I know that they're in between attacks, and then I'll roll out and I'll just start wailing on them with the revolver. You can also craft bombs at crafting stations. There are 4 different types of bombs and 4 different types of ammo for your revolver, which you can craft in future locations. There's an element system to that. So the reason that there are 4 different types of each ammo type is there's the regular, which is 1, and then there's 3 elements. It's kind of like a paper rock scissors system, if you will, for combat. So certain enemies you'll come across may have an elemental shield, and you'll have to pair the correct element to break the shield before you can deal regular damage. Otherwise, you'll just start dealing like no damage.
Wow.
So there's a few of those.
That's a lot of planning to go into that.
Yes, yeah. It was one of the things that I kind of decided we needed because we didn't have a class system, right? We didn't have a skill tree, So, what do the tools do for you? What makes them useful? Why do you want to use the different tools? Why do I want to switch ammo types, right? So there had to be a reason for that, and it kind of makes combat a little bit more player because you can come across later on in the game anyway. You can come with mobs that have 2 different types of elemental shields. So if you've got, the elements aren't, elemental, they're like different, whatever. So if you've got life bullets and you've got death grenades, you can pair that in your battle. So you come across 2 different enemies with 2 different shield types. You'll need to switch to the revolver or switch to the bombs depending on who you're attacking, just to kind of like spice it up a little bit. Yeah, so again, as I was saying, sorry, I went off on a tangent a little bit there. You can kind of, as the player, decide if you're going to be somebody who relies on their tools or if you're just kind of like a hack and slash kind of guy and you want to get in there. So there's different armor types. Basically, whenever you get to epic gear in the game or legendary gear in the game, because there is the rare stuff, you'll get to decide between which one you want to craft. You can craft both if you like, but you can decide because the materials are kind of rare. So there's going to be the gear type that increases your tech attack or your technique attack, which is, if I have a revolver, I'm going to deal more damage with it if I have a lot of... Or you can just stack health, which is going to be somebody who's going to go in for melee. So those are kind of like the decision you can make as a player.
Wow, okay, that's loads. Jeez.
Yeah. When you put it like that, I guess it is.
Well, that's answered the question of, is there anything in the game that you spent way too long on that you shouldn't have?
Yes, exactly.
How about just see last answer?
See last... Exactly.
Yeah. But is there anything that was really stupid, like a rock you had to paint, and it shouldn't have taken you so long?
Anything that took...
Oh,
no.
We're losing some
anything really...
connections here. We're having a bit of...
Yeah, I think we're bleeping in and out. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. It's, like I say, the Discord's taking a hammering.
All right, so rephrase your last question. I'm sorry, we're going to start from there.
No, it's all right. It's okay. So, is there anything in the game that you spent way too long on that you really shouldn't have?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Let me think about that.
Big breath.
Big breath. I would say just like the starting location in the game.
The little room? You mean the
no, not the little room, but like where you come out on the world map.
Oh, where I keep dying now, you mean?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right there.
Okay.
That's actually changed. So, and this version is the version that I've finalized, and I've been like, yeah, this is it. Finally, we're starting. I spent way too long because I kept making the stupid decision of going with what was already there, right? The stupid decision of not knowing when to just scrap it and just restart from what I knew was going to be the right thing to do. I kept kind of putting in patch fixes, if you will, or like band-aids on things that I knew were problems. So in the other versions of the game, even if you watch like alpha gameplay, you actually start in the center of the map. And so I kept going over iterations and iterations and iterations and iterations of this center point in the map. Right? And I was always like, there's something just wrong here. I don't know. And I'd have somebody play with it, and they'd just go completely the wrong direction every single time, and nobody would ever be able to figure out where to go. And every time, no matter what I did to this starting location, it didn't work, right? I spent a lot of time, and again, it wasn't like a one single long span of time. It was always something I came back to. So I'd make progress in other development parts of the game, and then I'd come back to the starting area. And yeah, it's just, oh man. So yeah, I would exactly, and it just frustrated me. And my wife knows, I would complain to her all the time. Somebody starts up the game, they walk out of the little room, and there's a sword there, and they just run the opposite direction, wouldn't pick up the sword, wouldn't get anything, and then just go die. And they'd be like, "Why don't I have a weapon?" And I'd be like, "It's standing in front of you." But when you start in the middle of the map, it's overwhelming how much there is to kind of look at. Even if there isn't that much in the game, the main points on the map are very in your face. So like you're kind of panning the camera and you're around, and you're like, geez, where do I go?
Yes.
And that's not something I ever understood. For me, it was like, yeah, I exit the door and there's a sword there. I'm going to go pick up the sword, right? But that never it never worked out the way I wanted it to.
I'm usually the other person. Like
right.
When you're playing like Sonic.
Yeah.
And I was always like, and go. Okay, I'm gonna go left. I'm going left. Like, no. But then you go, and the one in 1,000 times you go left, there's a secret room. You're like, yes.
Right.
I knew it.
Right.
So that is normally me, right. I'm afraid.
Yeah, so as you can see, the new starting location, which you know as the only starting location.
Yes.
You come out and you have ways you can go, yeah, but it's kind of like one general direction.
Yeah, I mean,
you can shoot off to the left. Yes. You can shoot off to the left, you can shoot off to the right, but it's not a full 360 directional. It's a lot less confusing. There's only a few landmark points that you can see right off the bat, and it's just less overwhelming for the player. And I find that it works just a heck of a lot better.
Yeah. Again, the catchphrase of the podcast: stop touching it.
Exactly.
So I might actually rename the podcast that.
I love that.
Yeah, you're all
gonna make that my.
You're all addicted to it. You love it.
I know. Yeah. It's a problem.
So this is going to be PC release only, or
at the start, yeah. Again, because of those previous Switch issues that I had run in the past, I want to avoid anything that I might, come across. So just in case, it's only coming out on Steam first. I'm going to vet it on Steam, make sure everything's happy, everything's good, make sure there's no crazy issues that I didn't see before. Because I will only, who knows what'll happen once it comes out on the Switch. I'm sure I'll have a slew of other problems. But, being just me on the development side, it's going to be hard to juggle all those different issues.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the Steam release first. Again, just making sure everything's good to go. And then I'll work on the Switch release in the near future. It'll probably be within the next couple of months after the game comes out.
Oh, okay.
But,
wow. Okay. Well, I sold my Switch. I don't know. I can't in there.
That's all right. You got Steam. It's fine.
Yeah. I'm all right. And release date for this Steam version?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
so I'm actually about to send a estimated release date to Sedok, which I've been calling Sedok. I hope I pronounced that properly. Who is my publisher here soon. I've been doing, as I've said earlier on the chat, a cleanup phase, right, of the map. So all the content is actually in the game. Everything's there, but not all of it is production, right? right?
Okay.
Or ready to be seen by public eyes, right? You can beat the game, but there's things that happen where you'd go, what the heck just happened, right? So I'm kind of going over and all throughout that content and just cleaning up and just making sure we're good to go. That shouldn't take me too long. It should only be a few weeks, but we'll be careful with that assumption. Probably probably we're looking at a month and a half before the game actually comes out.
So you're going mid-May?
Mid-May, I would say. Mid-May.
Mid-May.
Yeah.
Okay, you heard it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely going to pick it up. I will, like I said, I will try and I won't try. I will do a live stream of this version, unless you want me to wait for the released version.
No, I mean that's up to you. If the beta content that you have there, you're locked to the first zone, I would say, in the game, and that is kind of basically that's final content. So if you stream just that first zone, you've got final content. There might be random updates here and there. In fact, there will be random updates here and there because I have a list of bugs and different changes I need to make to quality of life fixes, that kind of thing. Yeah, sure. But it won't be anything too crazy for you. Mainly menu fixes and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, we'll do that. I'll do a live stream before you launch. So within the next week or two, I'll do a live stream of this.
Perfect.
And I'll actually read the text.
Yeah, sounds great.
Treating you.
Just for me. I like it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I had something else I wanted to say. We've done release date. Completely gone from my mind. What is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to mention?
That I can think of. I vented for not vented, but I've gone on spiels, so I think we've covered what's in my mind anyway.
Oh, got it. I've got it. How can people help? What do you need?
How can people help?
What do you need?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Contact my publisher, Sedok. And if you're already in the beta, fill out the review forms or the feedback forms, which the publisher has provided you with, please. I really want to know what I can do to fix different quality of life issues you might have with the project. And then also just spread the word, of course. But yeah, quality of life fixes. If there's anything you have a serious issue with the game, please let me know. Please don't bottle it up. I want to know that. Because anything you have a problem with, chances are other people will have a problem with too. And I'd love to get it fixed before the game releases. So, yeah.
And where's the best place to contact you for those? Is it still through the publisher's report?
You can contact the publisher directly, or you can contact me at Sean G. Garland on Twitter, or you can contact Righteous Games on Twitter as well. I can provide you with the link for those. And then we have an company email, which is support@righteousweaselgames.com.
Righteous Weasel. Cool. That's a good name. Where's that name from? Anywhere in particular?
Nowhere in particular. I just like weasels, and righteous weasels are an oxymoron. So okay. Everyone knows weasels are weasels. So
I like it. That's good. That's a good one. There's some actually really interesting names. Now I've started asking people where their company names come from.
You'll be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite good. Okay, so where can they find more about the game?
More about the game. The most up-to-date information is definitely on Steam. If you just look for Eternal Edge Plus on Steam, you'll find it. I do my best to post announcements and upcoming information on there. We have a website. Don't go to it. It's out of date. We'll be updating that as well. But definitely just Steam and Twitter. I do a lot of posting on Twitter. You can find pretty much all the latest information on the game on Twitter. So if you follow on Twitter, that's definitely probably the best way to keep up to date.
Lovely. So we can wishlist it now, can we?
Correct. You can. So please do.
Do that. Wishlist it on Steam. Wow. Okay. Well, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. Right, okay, so there you go. That is. Oh, actually, I have one last question.
Yes.
Is the plus the word plus or the plus sign?
So it's both.
Oh man.
It's the word plus on the executable, and for that reason is because Windows usually has a hard time with special characters. So it's the word plus on the executable. Online, it's the symbol plus.
Okay. Just
Yeah,
totally irrelevant
both.
question, but now we know.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you for joining me, and I'll
Thank you very much.
I'll tweet about the live stream, so we'll do that again. And if you're around, maybe you can join in and
Yeah, I would love to. It'd be
watch
great.
me do things that I shouldn't be doing on your game.
Yes, this is exactly what I want.
I'll have to mute you in case you start shouting at me.
Right. Pretend I'm not there, but I'll be freaking out in the background. So.
Not left. Why would you do that?
No, why would you do that?
Start again. Cool. Okay. Well, that is the end of the podcast. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll talk
done.
to you again. All right.
Let me stop the live stream. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much for joining the live stream.